Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. And all right, we are to our fan favorites. Yes, shout outs and rants. We're going to keep the same order. So we'll have Matt, Karen, Jay, Mr. Marks, and I will come in batting fifth. Matt, do you have a shout out and a rant for us today?
I'm going to go a bit off pattern here. I just wanted to offer a quick follow up to a subject that I discussed, I think, one or two podcasts ago, the scandal and the questions around Francesca Gino at Harvard University. She is the business ethics professor who had been accused of falsifying her research data, which compliance officers have quoted far and yon for years now in their own presentations and predicated their compliance policies based on her work. And in my last podcast, I think I talked about how a group of academics calling themselves Data Colada had published a really blistering critique of her work and basically accused Miss Gino of falsifying her data. In fairness to Miss Gina, I wanted to circle back to that the other week, she finally broke her silence on this and has filed a lawsuit against Harvard University and the three academics who make up Data Colada, accusing the university and them of basically wrongful termination and sex discrimination. And her complaint, which goes into painstaking detail, is not a good look for either Data Colada or Harvard University, basically accuses the Harvard Business School of conspiring with the Data Colada people, who apparently went very quietly to Harvard Business School and said, "We have this research here that you might want to look at, but we're not going to share it with you unless you open an investigation into Miss Gina and then share the results of that investigation with us privately, and then we'll publish our work," which is not cool. That certainly smells very fishy to me. And then, according to Miss Gino, the university also came up with a research compliance policy solely for her that they did not disclose to anyone else, did not inform Miss Gino about the nature of this policy until after they had done their investigation, which basically was designed to paint her as guilty and then force her to resign. And she is on long term leave from the university and is basically no longer affiliated with them. I am not sure if it is entirely appropriate to say she is fired or resigned, but we will just say she's not a teacher at Harvard Business School anymore. I don't know what the truth is yet. I don't know when we will see that. I don't know what might come of this lawsuit. But in fairness to Ms. Gino, I just wanted to make sure that we all had her side of the story out there as well. I still will say what I said the first time we talked about this is that to a certain extent, for most compliance officers, the correct question to ask here is who cares? Because they're quibbling over her research. And I get that's important to Ms. Gino, but for compliance officers, we still have to say that behavioral ethics matters. It is an important thing. And even though there might be questions about one particular academic's research into this field, that doesn't mean that we chuck behavioral ethics out the window and just stick with rote, airtight, hard compliance controls governing every aspect of a worker's life. So that's all I wanted to say this week about that, just to make sure that Ms. Gino has her fair due, that she's a very different take on what is happening here, and that is worth people paying attention to as well.
Karen Woody, do you have a shout out and or rant for us?
I have a shout out. I'm a little disappointed that Jonathan is not on the call from London, but my shout out was to what I've been watching a lot this summer, which is the Women's World Cup. So I'm going to shout out to the beautiful game, and mostly that this has really felt like a not an imbalanced tournament. So the shout out is really to this idea that it was so wonderful to watch countries that maybe don't usually mount teams that are as competitive, but it felt like a balanced number of teams. There weren't that many total blowouts, or actually, if there was a blowout, that team ended up winning the next game when they were in the larger rounds. And I was just impressed that this is really a true global sport that women can make a career out of. And I feel like this is one of the few times that it's been so evident that that's not just for a handful of countries, but a number of people really have impressive skills and have the ability to show them. Other than the disappointment of Jonathan's team being in the final for me. And so we do have a sort of a classic final. But other than that, I thought it was so impressive to see just such an incredible showing from so many different countries.
Jay Rosen, do you have a shout out and or rant for us?
I have a shout out, and I'm surprised I'm doing this. I'm tagging along with Karen and her ode to the beautiful game. And my shout out, believe it or not, is going to go to PK's penalty kicks. And if you don't put the ball in the back of the net, you can't advance to the next round, USA. So I felt really disheartened about that. But when I replayed in my mind the penalty kick sequence, and first of all, we stopped one of them, so we're up by one. And then that whole game is crammed into those 2 to 3 minutes. And it's a lot of pressure, but I used to say, oh, this isn't a real sport. It gets ties. You have to do it this way. But if you look at U.S. sports, you have to go into overtime for hockey or for basketball. Baseball, you play it. This is probably the best solution to a sticky wicket. I like that. That's something for Jonathan. But I'm a big fan of the penalty kick. I hope the World Cup is not decided by them, but here's to you and the beautiful game.
Mr. Marks, do you have a shout out and or rant for us?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out to a fruit and a baseball, and the combination of the two, which they call the Savannah Bananas. And if you haven't seen these cats, I encourage you to go see them. They started in 2016, and they've really changed the way you can actually have fun at a baseball game. Not that baseball isn't fun for us purists, but it's a very interesting twist, much like when I grew up with watching the Harlem Globetrotters play the Washington Generals. It's a little bit of a circus, but I think it's a whole lot of fun. I think every one of the guys, and certainly the ownership of the team, should be commended because they really do they put some entertainment in the game of baseball. I hope there's some bleed over to the traditionalists that just love the game, but I find them extremely entertaining, and I encourage everybody out there to go see them. It's a great show.
I have two shout outs. The first one is to Judge Karen Seeley. Judge Seeley sits as a trial court judge in the great state of Montana, and she found that the state of Montana's prohibition of the Montana Environmental Commission's ability to investigate or even measure greenhouse gases violated the Montana Constitution, which reads, all persons are born free and have certain inalienable rights. Those include the right to a clean and healthful environment. Also, the state and each person shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment in Montana for present and future generations. That language came from the 1972 Montana Constitution. This is the first time a U.S. trial judge or any U.S. judge has found a constitutional right to a clean environment. Now, this may be limited to the great state of Montana. It may be overturned on appeal, but we now have precedent. The second shout out is for a book, Level Up, and a friend, Mary Shirley. Mary published her first solo author book, Level Up, this week. So I want to shout out to Mary Shirley. The compliance community has some great books coming out. Christy Grant Hart has a book coming out. I've got another book coming out, and the number of books by compliance practitioners and professionals continues to increase. But shout out to Mary. Get a copy of Level Up. I've read it. It's got some great tips for you. Lady and gentlemen, with that concludes this episode. Thanks, everyone, and I look forward to a great fall season.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.